Shalom, everybody. Welcome to this week's Journey Through Torah. This week, we are in Genesis chapter 23. We're continuing the story of Avraham, although it kind of shifts the focus in this parashah. It's Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. But as we get into this portion, we see that the first thing that's mentioned is how long she lived and that she passed, that she died. So the life of Sarah, well, she lived 127 years and then she died. Well, okay, that's kind of a weird way to put it because the entirety of the rest of the portion, it's not really going to be about her, really, is it? So one of the things we're going to find in here is that at the end of this life, Avraham was seeking to honor his bride, and he wanted a place to put her. But even in that, it was a place that was to be not just quickly forgotten, not a place that he couldn't just come back to. No, I mean, he was wanting to make sure that this was a place that would be in his family for generations to come. And so he had to make certain precautions to see that would happen. And he had to purchase the land. We'll get into that in just a minute. And he did this for the intent of no disputes. Okay. He did this to honor his bride, and he did this for generations to come. And also he did this in faith, because when he purchased this land, he did it because Yahweh said that this land will be yours. So he would not have purchased the land to do that if he didn't believe that his descendants would inherit this land. See that? Because, I mean, would you buy something that would do you of no good later? You know, so he's purchasing it now with the intent of it's going to have purpose and meaning in years to come. So we're going to get into a few things here, and let's start off with Genesis 23 and verse 1 and 2. So Sarah lived to be 127 years old. These were the years of Sarah's life. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, also known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Avraham came to mourn Sarah and to weep for her. So he goes and he asks for the cave of Machpelah, and he goes to in front of the council, the city council, and he says he would like to purchase the cave, the field and the cave together that belonged to Ephron. And they go in this back and forth exchange, not really getting into that exchange here today, but it is kind of funny when you read it, how it kind of transcribes. It's the extreme short version of it is, oh, no, you are a prince of God among us. I mean, they reverence him, right? And says, just take it, it's yours, use it. And Abraham says, no, I desire to purchase it. I'm just a stranger and a sojourner with you. There's something in that as well, because we are all strangers and sojourners here in this world until the time to be, until the eternal, right? So he says, I'm just strangers and sojourners with you. I do desire to purchase the field, and I would like to publicly state I would like to purchase this field from Ephron. And he says, oh, please take it. It's yours. You know, just have it. Just do whatever you want with it. And it's interesting because he kind of throws an inflated price out there at him. You know, oh, 400 shekels. What's it worth to me and you? We're friends, right? Nah, just take it. And Abraham immediately weighs out 400 shekels and gives it to him. It's kind of like he's elevating the price of something that just be ridiculous for the amount of what you're paying for it. It's like, oh no, even if I was asking this, don't worry about it. But an underlying tone is, well, that's what I really want. You know, so Abraham doesn't heckle with him. He doesn't do anything. He just gives it to him. All right. But why the cave? Why the cave of Machpelah and the land that's around it? So a couple of things here. Machpelah, the name Machpelah means to fold or to repeat or to couple together. Tradition states that Adam and Eve were buried there. I can't say that as fact or not, but we do know that Avraham and Sarah would be buried there, and Yitzhak and Rivka would be buried there, and Yaakov and Leah would be buried there. And so the cave at Machpelah would be a burial place for Avraham and for the generations to come. It would be something that's given there. And also that's interesting to note that the cave of Machpelah was the very first land acquisition that is mentioned in the Torah. It's the very first purchase of land that is given in the Torah. Interesting, isn't it? Why would that be interesting? Because you're buying a cave for the intent of a burial plot, but it is saying that yet when I die, I will be in my land. I will be in the land that belongs to me and my descendants. Kind of like when Israel came out of Mitzrayim, Yosef said, Yahweh will visit you, and when he does, and he brings you out and takes you to the land, bring my bones with you. because he wanted his bones to be laid to rest in the land of the promise. All right. So again, what we have here is this was the very first place, and it was done as an act of faith. It wasn't just done to say, no, I want that land and I want my son to be able to do it. No, this was done as an act of faith and saying, I'm going to give you this land. So Abraham was, in essence, not just sowing death into the earth, but he was sowing his belief, his life, and his faith into that plot of land in the cave that was on it as well. Okay. It's interesting to note as well that everyone who was placed in the cave was part of the lineage of Mashiach. Yeah, Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, all of these are in the lineage of Mashiach. Again, attributing to another promise that is given there, that he will restore, he will redeem, and he will bring his people to the land, even the new Jerusalem that is to come, right? But why Hebron? Why Hebron? Because the cave of Machpelah was in Hebron. What's the big deal about Hebron? What's so special about it? Okay, well, here's a couple thoughts regarding Hebron. In Genesis 13:18, this is where Avram moved after Lot moved away from him. It says that Avram moved his tent, and he came to live by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to Adonai. In Genesis 14:13, it says that Avram was in Hebron when he discovered that Lot was taken captive, and then Avram armed his men and went up to battle for him. Okay, it says, then a survivor came and told Avram the Hebrew, who was dwelling by the large trees belonging to Mamre the Amorite. Again, where we know where this is because of 13:18. And then in Genesis 18:1, we know that this is where Avram was when Adonai appeared to him when he was sitting by the entrance of his tents during the heat of the day. When Yahweh appeared to Avram and he was sitting in his tent by the door, and he looks up and he sees these three men. He goes out to meet and says, come eat with me and I'll bless you, right? All this. So this was at Hebron as well. Okay. And Genesis 37, moving forward, again, we're talking about descendants and things to come, and we see certain things happening in certain places for acts of promise, right? So we already know that Avram had a special relationship to this place because this is where Yahweh made promises to him. This is where some things were revealed to him. This is where Yahweh says, don't worry about life or what happens. He will be victorious in these things. Yeah, he may have to go to battle, but he will be victorious in all of these things, right? So again, there's something special that's about Hebron, and what is it? Well, let's jump forward a little bit. Let's go to Genesis 37, verses 13 and 14. Israel says to Yosef, his son, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? So come and I will send you them. And he said to him, Hineni, here I am. So he says to him, so go now and see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Interesting here, because when you read, it says he went him to check on the flock. It's a et zone, the Aleph Taf zone with the dots above the Aleph Taf in the Torah scrolls. It's interesting because it's drawing our attention to what's about to happen and what's about to happen with the flock and the shepherds and in relationship to Yosef as well, and what's going to happen to him. There's a lot, not getting into all that story right here, right now, but we do see that Yosef was an integral part of Israel being restored, right? Of the family coming back together, and as well as we see in the days of Yosef, but also in days to come, how the kingdom is divided and split, and then there is still looking for a time of restoration when all Israel will come back together. We'll get to that in a second, because we have here, it says he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and that's Emek Hebron. Valley, again, Emek is the word for valley, meaning deep, and my thinking here is as well Psalm 92:5 says, how great are your works, O Yahweh, your thoughts are very deep. I use this because it means a valley, but it also means something very deep, and you could say this metaphorically, right? A deep thought, a premise that really requires some thinking and some digging into, right? Because we have valley means that, but valley can also be translated as mystery. And why the jump? Why do that? It's not really a jump, because Hebron is not a valley. Hebron is on a mountain. So how can you send them from the valley of Hebron if Hebron doesn't have a valley? So what's really being said here? There's more to it than meets the eye. Okay, he sent him from the depths. He sent him so as something deep to go into this place. And again, we know this is where Yahweh appeared to Avram, so there was something special that was about this place. The word Hebron is from the word Haver, which means to join together, to couple, to have fellowship with one another. Haver is also the word for friend. Okay, so again, it means association, to be associated with someone or something. And where do we see this coming to play later, even in regards to Abraham and Yosef, right? Abraham, the blessing and the promise to Abraham is that he would become, he would be a blessing, and that all nations of the earth would be blessed in him. And so all would be a blessing in the earth because of Abraham, be brought into a place of life and covenant. And then we see Israel helping to fulfill that role, right? Israel, ultimately, because of idolatry, Israel was split into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And then because of idolatry, the northern kingdom was dispersed and went off, and they were gone. And they become assimilated into the other nations, and it's hard to say where they really are now. A lot of people have speculated where they went, but there isn't solid documents to say exactly and specifically where each tribe went to go. No, they went off and they became assimilated wherever they were, right? Because even today, we don't know, which tribe of a person of Israel is. But there's a day coming when Yahweh says all people will come and be brought back into a place restored to him. And this is all Israel. We see this in Ezekiel 37:16, where it says, Son of man, right after the dry bones vision, right? It says, Son of man, take one stick and write upon it for Judah, for the children of Israel, his companions. That phrase right there, his companions. It says, Le Yehuda, Livnei Israel, Havaro. This word Havaro, this last word there, is the same as we use for the root of Hebron, to be joined with and to be associated with, joined together. And then it says, take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, for all the house of Israel, his companions. It's Le Yosef, it's Ephraim, Vekol Beit Israel, Havaro. So again, this word, Havarav, this word that's used there again is to be associated with and to be joined with. So the question comes to this mystery of Hebron. Who are we joining ourselves to? Who did Avram join himself to? He joined himself to Yahweh. And we need to put in front of us these decisions and these things in our life as well. Who are we joining ourselves to, and for what purpose and why, right? Psalm 119:63 says, I am companion of all them that fear thee, and of them that keep your precepts. Again, who are your companions? Who are you joining yourself to? Proverbs 28:24 says, whoso robs his father or his mother and says it is not a transgression, the same as the companion of a destroyer. Ecclesiastes 4:9 and 10, two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they will fall, one will lift up his fellow. Same word used there, havaro. But woe to him that is alone when he falls, for he has not another to help him up. Again, we do need to be joined to someone, something, but again, what we decide to join and associate with is very important. If we join ourselves to Yahweh, we're doing so because of a place of covenant that Yeshua has brought us into, but we see this is also related and associated to Abraham and the promises that were given to him. Galatians 3:26-29 says, in union with the Messiah, you are the children of God through this trusting faithfulness. Because as many of you were immersed into the Messiah, have clothed yourselves with the Messiah, in whom there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor freeman, neither male nor female. For in union with Messiah Yeshua, you are all one. Also, if you belong to the Messiah, you are the seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. So again, what you are joining yourselves to has an impact on your life and how you live. Ephesians 3:6 says, in union with the Messiah and through the good news, the Gentiles were to be joint heirs, a joint body, and joint sharers with the Jews in what God has promised. Okay, so again, what are we joining ourselves to? Abraham, in purchasing this cave of Machpelah in Hebron, he was not joining himself to the people of that land. He was joining himself to the promise that Yahweh made, saying, I'm going to give you this land. So this was something that he was working out in faith. So why did he insist on purchasing the land? I mean, we see like Psalm 24:1, where it says, the earth is the Lord's in all its fullness. And Psalm 115:16, it says, he has given the earth to the children of Adam. So see that? Everything belongs to Yahweh, but he's given the earth to the children of Adam. So why purchase? So that come down later, he would know, there would be no dispute on who owned it and what the point of all this was. Right now, we do know today there are disputes, but that has nothing to do with the promise that was given here, because we do know and we do read, Abraham purchased the land, it belongs to him, right? So how it falls from there, it's really on us, but we do know what it says. So after all of this, the time comes when Avram wants his servant to go get a bride for Yitzhak. Now, Yitzhak at this point has no bride. And so in order for Avraham to have descendants as many as the sand on the seashore, well, he kind of has to have some grandkids, right? And all he has at this point is Yitzhak. So Yitzhak needs a bride, right? So Avraham talks to his servant. His servant is never specifically named in this passage. He's just called the servant. I believe that's to make the point of showing other pictures, other motives, other things. I believe this is a picture of the Ruach HaKodesh going and getting the bride out of all the nations, out of all the other places that were not the land, and bringing them back into the land to the Son. Okay, I believe all this is a picture of that, kind of like spoiler alert. That's where we're kind of looking at all this, but of bringing back into the land. So again, he needs a bride. So what does he do? It's often believed that Eliezer is the servant that went. Eliezer means God is help. God is my help, right? So again, who helps us? The Ruach HaKodesh helps us. He is our comforter. He is our helper. And so we help to hear the voice of Yahweh through the Ruach HaKodesh. So again, just more pictures of who this could be and what it represents. So Genesis 24, 1-8 says, So Avram was old, advanced in years. Adonai blessed Avram in everything. And Avram said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who managed everything that belonged to him, this is why they believe it's Eliezer, now put your hand under my thigh, so that I may make you take an oath by Adonai, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from among the daughters of the Canaanites whom I am dwelling. On the contrary, to my land, to my relatives, you must go and get a wife for my son Yitzhak. But the servant says to him, suppose the woman were unwilling to follow me after this land. Should I then have your son go back to the land you came from? Verse 6. Avram said to him, see to it that you don't return my son there. Adonai, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land, and who spoke to me and made a pledge to me, saying, to your seed I will give this land. So he will send an angel before you, and he will take a wife for my son from there. If the woman is not willing to follow after you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Nevertheless, you must not return my son there. So a couple interesting things I want to point out. There's a lot you can say here, but a couple things that I would like to point out is where he takes an oath by Adonai, the God of heaven and the God of earth. And then when he says, so what if, am I going to be successful in this? What if she doesn't want to come, or what's going on, right? So he says, so Adonai, the God of heaven, will send an angel before you, and if the woman is not willing to come after you, then you'll be free from this oath. So what's saying here? Why make the distinction, the God of heaven and the earth, and then he says Adonai, the God of heaven? If he's the same, why make a differentiation between the two? Well, we know he is the God of heaven and earth, right? And he says, this is Yahweh Elohei HaShamayim v'Elohei HaAretz. Yahweh created all things and rules over all things. So while he is the Elohim of the heavens, he is still the Elohim of the earth. He is not so far removed that he cannot help you. He's not saying that the God of the heavens and the earth is going to do this. No, the God of heaven will do this. I believe it's just a matter of emphasis and what we're trying to say. Okay, because when he says the God of heaven will go before you, he's saying, no, he will go before you. He is spiritual. Heaven rules over the earth, right? Yahweh in heaven rules over the earth. So he will go before you in all these things and bless you, and he will give you a successful mission. And we do see phrases like this being used many times. One example is Solomon, and his prayer for the dedication of the house, dedication for the temple, right? The phrase here in heaven is used twice, and here from heaven is used 6 times, as well as other similar expressions that are used in his prayer. But the idea is for Yahweh to remain enthroned in heaven and have no contact or rule on earth? No, that's not it at all. It is that Yahweh is a witness to our hearts and actions, and he is the judge of all things. Here's an example. 1 Kings 8:30-32 says, so listen to the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel, when they pray toward this place here in heaven, your dwelling place. And when you hear, forgive. If a man sins against his neighbor and is made to take an oath, then comes and swears before your altar in this house, then hear from heaven and act and judge your servants, condemning the wicked, bringing his way on his own head, justifying the righteous, giving him according to his righteousness. So in relationship to what's happening with Eliezer and Avram, he didn't sin against him, but he is taking an oath. And so again, this is kind of, the idea is the same. When the oath is made here in heaven, and go before and let the righteousness of your righteousness be done to your righteous people. Here in heaven, act on earth, right? Isaiah 59:1 It says, behold, Adonai's hand is not too short to save, nor his ear too dull to hear. Psalm 145, 18 and 19 says, Adonai is near to all who call on him, and to all who call on him in truth. He will fulfill the desire of those who fear him, and he will hear their cry and save them. Sometimes people are looking for Yahweh and crying out for him, and they don't even know it. And that's why Yahweh, like Avraham, they said, you're a prince of Yahweh among us. When he went to the people, how did they know that? Because he testified of Yahweh. He spoke of Yahweh. He declared who he served and the one that he served, and he was passing through the land, right? So they knew that. But sometimes you may be looking for Yahweh, but you don't exactly know what you're looking for. That's why Yahweh sends people to help us with that as well. We see example in Shaul. So Acts 17, verses 23 to 28 says, for while I was passing through and observing the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship without knowing, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all things in it, since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by hands, nor is he served by human hands, as if he needed anything, since he himself gives to everyone life and breath and all things. Verse 26. From one, he made every nation of men to live on the face of the earth, having set appointed times in the boundaries of their territory. They were to search for him, and perhaps grope around for him and find him. Yet he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, for we also are his offspring. It's interesting because Rav Shaul uses these people and where they're at and what they understand to tell them about Yahweh. He even quotes their own poets, their own contemporaries of the time, people, I've heard songs, in him we live, move, and have their being. It's in here in Acts. Rav Shaul quoted it, but that's not from the Tanakh. That was from the prophets that of that time, or the nations and the poets rather of that time. So it's just one of those interesting little things that we have there, because the point is valid. Okay, the point is valid. Everything we have is because of him. He gave us life. In him we do move. In our very next breath is because of him, and we are his children, right? So all of this coming through. So we have that promise, just as Yahweh told Avraham that he would go before him, we have the promise for us as well that he will go before you, right? Avraham told his servant, it says, he will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. Yahweh will go before his people, and Yahweh will go before whom he calls for whatever purpose he calls them. He will go before you, right? We see examples. Isaiah 45, 1 through 3. Thus says Adonai to Koresh, his anointed, whose right hand he has grasped, so that it subdues nations before him and strips kings of their robes, so that doors open in front of him and no gates are barred. I will go ahead of you, leveling the hills, shattering the bronze gates, smashing the iron bars. I will give you treasures hoarded in the dark, secret riches hidden away, so that you will know that I, Adonai, calling you by your name, am the God of Israel. See, Yahweh says he's going before him to prove that Yahweh is the God of Israel, right? Because it's him, it's his glory, it's his honor, it's his kingdom that we're moving in, right? Exodus 23:20, the people were told, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you on the way and bring you into the place I have prepared. Deuteronomy 31:8 says, Adonai, it is he who will go ahead of you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. So don't be afraid or downhearted. See, Yahweh will go ahead of you. Yahweh will go before you. We have to make the decision to follow. Much like the scripture says, I put before you today life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life, right? So we have those decisions to make as well. So when Eliezer says to Avraham, he says, so what if I go to the bride and she says, I don't want to go? What do I do then? See, much like us, if we're supposed to be the bride, but we have the invitation, we don't have to accept. We can do our own thing. We can do our own way, and we don't have to accept. But the question is, will you accept? Will you go and be with your bridegroom? Will you go and be with him who called you out of the nations and to come to himself? We see that in Genesis 24, 1 through 8, and verse 8, it says, if the woman is not willing to follow after you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Nevertheless, you must not return my son there. There's no going back to the past, all right? You have the choice to make that if you are going to move forward and follow Yahweh in faith or not. You have that choice to make, right? We're told that in a few other places. Luke 10:23-24, Yeshua turning to his disciples, he said, "Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many prophets and kings desired to see what you were seeing, yet did not see, and to hear what you were hearing, yet did not hear." John 20:29, Yeshua says, "Because you have seen me, have you believed?" to Thomas, right? He says, "Blessed are the ones who have not seen and have believed." 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, "We walk by faith, not by sight." Will we trust Yahweh for no other reason than he is Yahweh? Will we trust him and follow him for no other reason other than he is who he said he was? Not because of circumstances or what's going to happen or how things are going to go or what our ideas or how things are going to work. No, are we going to follow him because he is Yahweh? And she answers. And when it was put to her bluntly, the question, will you go? She answers, I will go. That's it. No hesitation, nothing else, just I will go. And so when she goes and returns and they come trekking from all across the land, they come back and they see him out in the field. They see Yitzhak out in the field, which is interesting. This is the first time we actually see Yitzhak in the storyline from the time he was on the altar. From the time that Avraham put him on the altar at the Akedah, at the binding of Yitzhak, he put him there, and then Avraham comes down from the mountain, but we don't hear about Yitzhak anymore up until this point. And that is when the bride comes to meet the bridegroom, we see the bridegroom reappearing in the story. And then the bride says to the helper, Eliezer, I'm going to say the Ruach, "Who is that?" And he says, "That is my Lord." Literally, that is my Lord. And then he went in and they became one. So again, we have a lot of pictures, a lot of things to look at, a lot of things that can be taken in so many different ways in these stories. But all of this is for us to learn from, not just literal things that happened, okay? They are. Let's not forget that these are things that actually happened to actual real people. But yet, we can learn from these things, and we can also see how Yahweh is working in these stories, but also see how they're prophetic and how they're working for things in our life yet to come as well. All right. Well, guys, that's all I've got for you today. So I hope this has been a blessing to you. I hope this has been encouraging, but I also hope this has been challenging. I hope it causes you to go back and dig back into the Word to try to see a little more, learn about the heart of the Father, learn more about the heart of the one that we serve, right? So if this has been a blessing to you, I pray that you share these messages, help share these videos, help share these things, keep the word getting out there, right? And if this has been a blessing to you, please consider making a donation to help us continue to be able to make them and help put them out, all right? So until next time, be blessed, be a blessing, and shalom.